Let's talk a little bit about the High Elves. In terms of winners and losers in the last patch, High Elves were definitely losers in that they got no buffs whatsoever, which is a little bit painful. They did benefit from some changes. The slight buffs to Cavalry and Chariot Mass definitely benefited them. Lion Chariots were already pretty decent before. They were one of the few chariots in the game that was actually pretty usable. Now they're even better. Got some Silver Helms here. This replays from Loopy. He's under the banner of Nagarythe, and of course has some Shadow Walkers against the Foul Beastmen. Kalharmon here with the Beastmen. I should point out that under banner rules, double jabber is actually illegal, but that's fine here. I don't know if the jabber is actually good against the High Elves. We'll talk about that in a minute. A couple of Minotaurs with shields, Centigores, and some Ungor Spears up front. Lore of Wildcaster and a Doom Bowl to help counter that martial prowess. So High Elves jabbers, as it relates to jabbers, I don't think that they're actually as good against the High Elves. Generally, High Elves have very good archers, and he is vulnerable to archers. Only 60 armor and 15% missile resistance really is not enough. Likewise, his Mortis Engine effect, the damage to combatants, his or her, I guess I shouldn't assume with the Jabber Scythe, it is leadership conditional, right? So it only affects combatants with lower than 50% leadership, and considering High Elves have pretty high leadership, it's unlikely to affect them as much. Here you can see just the nukes from Soul Quench, and the shooting has effectively dealt with this Braze Shaman, Lore of Wilds. That's pretty good stuff. Yeah, Shadow Walkers just kind of kiting back a little bit. Shadow Walkers did get a poison nerf, as did all other units with poison, but I don't think they got anything else in response. Like, I don't think they got any other buffs or nerfs. Rangers come forward here. They're able to do a pretty decent amount of damage, and the Chariots kind of drawing out the Minotaurs from their support. We'll see how that goes. Over here, Centigores getting countercharged by Silver Helms, getting a pretty cost-effective trade initially, but then kind of getting overwhelmed by numbers. So Loopy with the High Elves here. He's on MP Crossroads, got plenty of open space to kite back here and continue only taking good engagements, but at the same time, his Rangers have kind of got caught up here. Not really a lot he can do about it at this point, but Shadow Walkers can certainly turn and shoot, and they are bursting down the Jabber Slides right now. That being said, Jabber Slides eating up all of this ammunition does mean that the Minotaurs with shields are going to be relatively unopposed here, and of course they do have 55% missile block chance, so whatever arrows do end up finding their way over here to these cowboys, get it? Anyway. They will have a 55% chance of being blocked, right? So that's pretty helpful there. Also helping to countercharge the chariots a little bit. Terror comes in, and at least a few units will be affected by that Mortis, as these Illyrian Reavers kind of route away here. But Shadow Walkers definitely making their presence felt. One unit does somewhat get caught up in this big mess, but they're mostly able to escape. Most of the cavalry still online as well. And the Archmage here, High Archmage, pops Armor of the Stars, goes Stalk and Invisible. Stalk and Unspottable, rather. Able to just kind of sit up in the air here, regenerate some magic, and then choose her engagement wisely. So one Jabber Slice been dealt with. That's very good. Doom Bowl's also pushing through, trying to get onto these Shadow Walkers. Shadow Walkers still do have quite a bit of ammunition left, and it's a pretty decisive volley there. Didn't quite shatter the Jabber Slice, but pretty close. Also a little bit of healing on these Rangers. They attempt to hold against the Minotaurs. Minotaurs, like I said, mostly unopposed at this point. Could be pretty dangerous in the late game. These Minotaurs actually catching up with the Lion Chariots. And, yeah, the High Elves are doing okay here. I do think that the Jabber Slice, like I said, a little bit of a mistake in this matchup. Honestly, you replace them with, like, more Centigores and Hounds, and I think Beastmen have a much better time in this specific instance. I mean, it's not typical that the High Elves will try and do this to you, but this is generally what you would see from them in terms of strategy, is to go with a wide archer kite and just try and shoot as much as possible before engaging in melee, given that the Beastmen have such a significant advantage in melee. That kind of brings us back to High Elves being weak in melee. I really feel that Martial Prowess needs a significant rework as a faction ability. I think that, honestly, they should probably just get most of those stats baseline, and then Martial Prowess should be primarily a speed buff. I know Skaven kind of have a speed modifier in their strength and numbers, and then scurry away, but I would say, with the High Elves, it should be maybe not HP conditional as it is right now, but it still could be HP conditional, honestly. Where you just have a speed buff, because really you think about the martial prowess, what it translated to in tabletop was always attack first, right? So In my mind, it should really be like a melee attack and speed buff, and then just give the melee defense that's on it, or at least the majority of it, to the unit's baseline, right? So instead of being, what is it, +2, +12, you would make it like +5 melee attack and +10 to 20% speed, you know, depending on the unit. I'm not really sure, but I feel like that would be a little bit more of a true translation. Then maybe you give all units just +10 melee defense, all high elf units that would have martial prowess. So that way it feels like less of a nerf and more of a benefit while you have it up, because right now it's more like, okay, once you lose martial prowess, your unit's just straight up nerfed and is going to be less cost effective than most other units in a similar price range after that wears off. So it's kind of a bit of a nerf right now. I'm not really super happy with the way that it's been implemented and has kind of played out. It's long been sort of a bane of the High Elves, in my opinion. You can watch my videos going back for quite some time, and never loved the martial prowess mechanic, so I do think it could do with a rework. And again, turning it into a speed modifier, that would help the High Elves, because, I mean, while they're not super slow, they're certainly not the fastest either. I mean, they're definitely, in many respects, the slowest elves. But yeah, that would definitely help with the speed situation. But generally, I mean, the High Elves kind of picking only good engagements and trying to preserve their troops does sort of fit with their theme, right? And having extra speed in order to dictate the engagements a little bit better, take smarter engagements. Maybe you have it be a speed and charge bonus? I don't know. Again, this Beastmen also have speed modifiers, so it could just end up feeling a little bit generic. But I'm curious to hear what you guys think. Or maybe they just rework it completely, where it's like either an activatable faction-wide thing, or a map-wide thing, or maybe it's, you know, not conditional on leadership, or sorry, health. Maybe you make it conditional on leadership. I don't know. What do you guys think? How would you rework martial prowess? I've presented a few ideas here, but I'm definitely open to suggestions. But anyway, as the Beastmen are making their final stand, we can see the High Elves are doing okay, at least in this battle. Doombull's going to charge through with his last few Minotaurs, but there's just too many Shadow Walkers here, and their poison melee damage, you know, decent weapon strength as well. They'll be able to hit the Minotaurs okay. Minotaurs are pretty much all exhausted, and some of these Shadow Walkers are still just tired instead, which does give them a pretty distinct advantage here. So they're starting to tire even as we speak. But anyway, Vigor debuff's definitely proving very critical, and the High Archmage is basically still completely fresh, right? Active, so she comes in, Silver Helms get a nice charge, follow-up from the Shadow Walkers with their poison blades, and be dragging down the foul cows. That'll be a victory for the High Elves. So great job to Loopy. Love to see this Shadow Walker build still be semi-viable. Again, I think had Kellerman taken even like cut down one jabber for more mobility, I think this might not have worked. It was pretty close at the end of the day, and Doombull is still quite healthy. You know, if he were given enough time to try and work through everything, he maybe could, although cycle charging from the completely healthy Archmage at this point is going to probably turn things around. Ungor Spearmen do try and come back and get a little bit of a support here, but Doombull ends up just dying to army losses. So sad day for the prize fighter, but great day for Loopy and the Shadow Walkers, who generated tons of value. I mean, they're basically like non-AP Way Watchers, right, with poison, which is really good against unarmored factions where you don't need the AP, and Beastmen certainly are that. I like this kind of mobile build. Lion Chariots end up being more of a blocking unit here than anything, don't generate that much value. Same thing, I mean, the Silver Helms actually do get some pretty impactful charges. Wow, 1,500 value. Who says Cav are dead? I mean, granted, Beastmen didn't bring any great weapon infantry here, but you certainly can use cavalry still, at least in multiplayer, in a number of situations, quite effectively. Interesting value to see there. And I will say that cavalry change did benefit the High Elves somewhat. Pretty good value on the Rangers as well in terms of kill numbers. Hoping to clear out some of that chaff from Collarmon's side. Doombull's pretty solid pick in this matchup. I do like that, although I probably wouldn't take Hellfire Sword just because fire damage is a bit risky here. But look at the Minotaurs with shields, man. This is why I always advocate you bring shields on your Minotaurs, because they just last longer, and they're going to take less damage from those incidental hits, meaning that they can just stand and fight, and especially with the Jabber Slides here to take the fire, they're not really exposed to too much damage and just wreck shop. Absolutely. Very impressive stuff. Jabber Slice, though, definitely paid the price for that. Yeah, High Elves in general, though, getting back to them, just kind of the state of the High Elves in general. I do think a few things they could still do for High Elves, besides reworking martial prowess, is the melee defense buffs they gave to the Hydra and the Glade Dragon. I also think they need to extend to all the High Elf variants of Dragon. I mean, right now, none of these guys really see super common use, and while it might not seem like much, like plus 4 or 5 melee defense, in the grand scheme of things, does actually matter when you're taking a lot of hits, especially from lower tier stuff. Like, in the last patch, they gave Hydras, including the Chili Boy, some extra melee defense, and I believe, yeah, the Crudis might have got it as well, but now the Chill of Sontar's up to 41 melee defense, which is pretty solid. If you look at the dragons, I mean, they all have above that already, but just in general, when a unit has this big of a hitbox, it's going to be in contact with a lot more models at the same time, and it'll just be taking a lot more hits, so that extra melee defense, you know, will help them survive those situations, and since it's harder than ever to try and disengage dragons, that melee defense is pretty important. I mean, you look at the Wood Elves, Glade Dragon, and now I think it had maybe the worst melee defense of any dragon type unit before, even compared to the Frostworm. 38 still not amazing, but it's definitely better than it was before. And if we look here, Norska's Frostworm, I believe now probably has the lowest melee defense. Oh no, 41, still higher. So, I mean, in general, not that the Frostworm is a great unit in and of itself. It could probably also do with the melee defense buff. I just think a lot of these slower, quote-unquote, and bigger flying monsters, because, like, yes, you can kind of pick and choose your engagements, not really in the same way a more mobile flying monster like a Griffin or a Manticore could, though, because you're more likely to get stuck in combat, have models in contact. You know, if you're getting chased by hounds, for example, like, very easy for them to get models in contact, and it's harder for you to screen with your own units, whereas with, again, like a Griffin or a Manticore, something that's a lot smaller, it's a lot easier to screen. So I think that's one change they could make besides reworking martial prowess. It's not like the High Elves are completely terrible. Like, White Lions are probably one of the best Great Weapon Infantry right now, and Great Weapon Infantry in general are in a pretty good place. Lothar Seaguard are still a very special, unique unit for the time being, and super strong. You know, you've definitely got good tools. Lion Chariots are better than they were before, and High Elf Cavalry should be a little bit better. Still, you know, don't want to be charging Great Weapon Infantry, certainly, and you don't want to be leaving them in combat for too long, but for those quick hit-and-run charges would be nice. One other thing, I've been making this suggestion for a while, and so far no one has listened to me, but can we please get Terror for the Rahagra's Pride? I mean, only one Regiment of Renown ability is pretty pitiful, to be honest. Like, most Regiments of Renown gain 2 traits, and I think that would not only synergize with their Mighty Roar, but, of course, it would give you a cheap Terror unit for the High Elves, 300 points cheaper than your current cheapest, which is the Flamespire Phoenix. Also not an amazing unit to be buying for that cost. But anyway, let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Arcane Phoenix, another pretty decent monster. Probably the best out of your monster options right now, some would say. You've got a number of powerful lords. Tyrion's in a pretty decent place. I mean, Teclis, Alariel also still quite strong. Let me know what you guys think, though. High Elves are definitely in an interesting place. They didn't get as much as I would have hoped for them. I do think they need some more, but maybe not as weak as people think. Let me know. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. If you like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button. Every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again. See you next time.